But again, building department stuff is not related to this. This is the land use plan. That's what we're here this evening to talk about, is when a developer comes to Natrona County and says, I want to do X, Y, Z, is that what we all agreed upon should happen in that area?
Nobody? God, was I the only one doing homework?
I was just curious about the new road. That's what this is about.
The new road.
Well,
Belt
the
loop?
new Outer Pass Road. I don't know what
West
the
Belt
road.
Loop?
I
Belt
don't know
Loop.
the names of things.
No,
I
you're
just
good.
know
We
where
all know
it's
we're talking
at.
about the West Belt Loop?
Yeah, went driving out there and, well, the gas station got tore down and.
Clark's Corner? No.
Well, Clark's
Used to be
Corner
trail
went
sign.
out, and then
That's
there's
it.
the one down, the red one on the right before you go out. That one got tore down just, last year, year before? It wasn't that long ago, it just got tore down. It used to be a gas station, it was sitting vacant for.
Trailside.
Trailside.
Yeah.
Or is that what you're referring to, the one on 220?
Yeah.
So that was all private driven and Natrona County didn't,
Well, yeah,
So
it ain't no one's fault that it happened, but I mean, are we gonna turn around and start developing it out there?
They have development
Because
plan
it's
for
going
that whole road,
and that was in,
from out there all the way in.
that is related to the efforts the highway department went through before they constructed it. And they invited public comment, they invited landowners, they said we project, I believe right at the intersection of West Belt Loop and 220, they saw that as a commercial use in there. So they saw things like gas stations, at, if you will, at a truck stop. They saw,
Why was Poison Spider cut in half?
well, that's a highway department conversation that I,
It was
had
a
to do
crazy
with,
deal. It's
it would
800
be-
pages, honey, your head would blow up if you read it.
It would have to do with
Yeah, there you go.
their requirements to build that bypass road.
Yeah, I guess that's part of the.
The key takeaway from that, though, is we've incorporated their recommendations into ours, so when a landowner adjacent to the West Belt Loop decides they want to develop it or they want to sell it,
Yeah.
we'll look back to this land use plan and say, okay, what did we all agree upon? We agreed that there was only access points at certain locations. We agreed that there was going to be a frontage road system. We agreed upon all these terms to.
And that's all in this pamphlet.
Yes, it's in the West Belt Loop corridor study, and we've got that.
Yeah, and that's,
You know, the takeaway in that, there's a couple pullouts in there. I'd recommend you pull those out, and it's got shaded for proposed land uses in there.
that was a loss of a lot of good agricultural land. And part of your guys' deal was supposed to be protecting agricultural lands. And I don't see a lot of that happening. I see areas that, have had families in them for decades and centuries, who started in them now have business parks in their background and in their backyards. And, I
So
don't
let's
quite.
use this land plan to prevent that. Let's use this land plan to say.
No, it's up to you guys to stop that. You're the decision makers.
I would argue
You know?
that Natrona County is the decision makers through this document. So
Well, if
give
that
us-
was true, Jason, then why would a petition with 52 people saying, we don't want this in our backyard, and 2 or 3 county commissioner meetings saying, we don't want this, why were they rolled over then? What we say means nothing.
I would say that I believe you're talking about Salt Creek again. Salt Creek.
That is the biggest
The-
boondoggle I had ever
the-
seen.
The land use plan, the prior land use plan called for industrial and commercial development. The current land use plan called for industrial and commercial development. So when we went through this process, there wasn't a consensus that, no, we want residential. The consensus was it's going to be industrial and commercial.
Yeah, but the consensus was from 1998. We're
That's
talking
what-
2016, we're talking like, almost 20 years later, after people had moved in and built their homes and started their lives again. And here we've got business parks popping up out in these rural areas. Why aren't they using these derelict spots all along the highways? Because they don't want to have to pay to decompose the building and tear them down. I would like to see them be forced. If you want to do this, then you need to do it in a pre-existing spot that needs to be redeveloped instead of them making a new, because you guys are always talking about footprints and making things more condensed. Well, let's use what's already been derelict instead of allowing these guys to walk in and say, well, you know what? I like that 20 acres of pristine land. Well, why don't you develop that 20 acres over there that looks like crap and it's got a building on it that looks like crap? You know, and you guys are the decision makers. And we look to you to really, really take this into account.
The guy that sold that property up there, he's got rights too.
Well, I'm sure he does. But when you got 52 people saying, you know what, we don't want it, and you go against those 52 people because he happened to make a phone call to a commissioner.
You know, Judy, we're way off base here. We're talking about a zone change that occurred off the Salt Creek Highway, and that's really not the purpose of today's evening.
Well, that's how that stuff works, though, and I think these people should be aware of it.
Yeah.
Jason, I think it is, because we do have a current development plan that, the county has a development plan that is referred to in every zoning meeting and what have you. It's a 1998 plan. The 1998 plan is in effect. This plan is no more than an update of that to reflect the changes that have occurred in the community, many of which there are very, very few changes, but they are currently operating under a plan. The Salt Creek Development Plan had perceived from the 70s that whole Salt Creek area section was going to be moving to commercial and industrial away from residential.
But that didn't happen, did it?
It did happen.
It didn't happen for 20 years.
But it did happen. It was that way in the 1970s when I was growing up as a kid, and it slowly but surely crept up. More demand occurred when the economy took off. But that was a perception of how that was going to change. Now, you take a look at the statistics that were given by KLJ on what the population grows. Those statistics were put in place in order to determine what demand was going to be in 2000 over the period of time to 2040 for the amount of residential housing and how many, given the estimated densities, how much acreage was going to be required over the next 25 years in Natrona County for residential development. So if the population isn't going to go up, then less territory is going to be required for residential development, so there will be less impact on the community. The question is, when you want the residential development to occur, and you want to avoid the conflicts such as we have in Salt Creek, have had any number of times over the years along Salt Creek and other places where we have industrial development up against rural residential or residential. Where do you want that to be?
Well,
Now,
you guys said you would make buffer zones.
Most of the changes in this document
Aren't a fact of reality.
The description of where things are now are mostly similar to what they were in 1998 and 1976.
I'd have to beg to differ with you. Terry Wingert once said, you guys had the 1998 land use plan and it has sat on the shelves for 20 years. You didn't go by it, so now you're going to want to fall back on the 98 land use plan, which you never used.
Oh, no, the
Okay.
98 plan has been adopted.
Well, we know it was
It's a legal
adopted,
document.
but it sat on the shelf gathering dust for 20
Exactly
years.
right.
And in the
Terry Wingert
meanwhile,
is the
people
one that-
moved in.
He's also the one that says, I don't want to update it. I don't want to spend the time. Oh, we spent so much time putting that 1998 document together, I don't want to spend the time to do it.
No, yeah, he did say
And-
that.
And so you've got a document that is a binding document now. It is used and referenced in every commissioner's hearing and in the planning and zoning commissioners. The question is, do you want to take a look at that and see how that relates to the real life today and whether or not the decisions the commissioners may be making or the planning and zoning may be making make sense for what may occur over the next 20 or 25 years?
And like I pointed out in the first part of this meeting, the first 5 topics, we don't have the employment anymore. So all 5 things that these guys are doing have no bearing on what our future is going to look like. and a bust.
But we don't know what the future's gonna look like. That is.
So why are we making plans all the way to 2040?
Well, in 2040.
Wouldn't it make more sense to do 5 years at a
2040
time?
is 23 years ago, 23 years from now, isn't that right? 24.
Yeah, that's a long time.
1980 lasted until about 2000. Isn't that 20 years?
Look at your own stuff, guys. You got
We have to.
you got employment up here, and this is the reality of it. This
We
is
have
not
to.
fantasy land we're working in.
Did we have to update this plan because now?
Every
we've messed
5
up?
years.
We have
Judy, I think
That's
I've got
all
it
you're
covered.
required.
There is a point in here that I want to point out. Okay, here it is, under the purpose of the development plan, last paragraph. This plan is intended to be a living document.
That's the first problem with it.
Should be monitored and the plan reviewed every 5 years.
5 years.
And updated every 20, or as needed to reflect the changing conditions and values.
Or needed. So we don't have to go 25 years out or 40 years out. We can go every 5 years and reflect what we're actually doing and not some fantasy land for $70,000 by some Joe who doesn't even live here.